Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today we have a very special guest, Professor Baatout. Professor Baatout is a director of the Radiobiology Unit at the Belgian Nuclear Research Center in Belgium. She is also a guest professor at Ghent University, teaching and directing research in the field of radiation biology, radiation protection, space biology, and medicine. She is an active member of the Mars Society Belgium, a Belgian representative at the United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation, a member of the Minister of Health, and was awarded by the Royal Academy for Sciences and Arts of Belgium the prestigious Wetrems Prize for the best discovery in the field of natural sciences. Presently, Professor Baatout is also a secretary/treasurer of the European Radiation Research Society and also a member of two advisory committees for the European Space Agency, the Human Spaceflight and Exploration Science Advisory Committee and the European Space Science Committee. She has been the promoters of 5 postdocs and 15 PhD students and is the co-author and author of some 140 international papers. Recently, she received the award of the BeSpace Personality of the Year, a recognition for her research and outreach achievement in the space sector, and was recognized by various magazines as one of the women that make Belgium move. I am so excited to be able to talk with such a qualified and amazing professor today and woman in the space industry. So welcome, Ms. Baatout. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure to interact with you and to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and when I was reading about you and your work, I was thoroughly impressed. This is exactly like what I would like to do in the future. So before we understand what really ignited and sparked your interest in the space industry, I'd like to know more about what your typical day is like.
Well, my typical day is quite different, I would say, right now with the COVID pandemic situation that we all know and that we all have to face. I think it's quite difficult to be able to continue and to pursue research and all our activities as we wish, but nevertheless we do our very best. But I think my typical day is going from helping and supervising students, really trying to direct them the best, with giving them the best advice I can, and also reviewing and participating in strategic decisions at the level of Europe, but also at the level of NASA. There are really big decisions that are being taken about the next steps in terms of human space exploration to the moon and to Mars. So I'm in different kinds of committees that are really taking these decisions and strategic decisions in order to move forward in terms of research. And then part of my day is also family related. So I have children. I have a very wonderful husband. So I also have some time dedicated to my own family and taking care of them, of course.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're able to balance your work and, a passion in the space industry and do so much and actually contribute to the space industry greatly while also maintaining a little bit of your family life. So I'm really glad to hear that. I also, like I mentioned earlier, you've been a part of so many research projects and you've helped so many students in their research projects. So could you describe your research on specifically investigating the impact of ionizing radiation on health through the development of better radiotherapy treatments for cancer patients?
Yes, indeed. So as you clearly mentioned, my work is really devoted to better understanding the impact of radiation on health. And maybe it looks very far away from everyone, but in fact, it's quite close to us because radiation is very often used for diagnostic procedures, but also for therapy of different kinds of diseases. And the main one is cancer. So improving and trying to fight against cancer and trying to really treat the best we can cancer with rays, with radiation, and with improved radiotherapy treatment is really fundamental and very important for our patients. Let's not forget that about 25 to 30% of people will develop or have developed cancer during their life, and still cancer has not been totally beaten. There is still a lot to do in terms of understanding and being able to counteract and stop the growth and also kill cancer cells. So quite a lot of my research is devoted to that. And but on the other side, also understanding the impact of radiation on the rest of the body, not just trying to kill cancer cells, but also to avoid any impact on the rest of the body, on the normal tissue. And that can happen. Radiation can have some impact. If we look at astronauts having to face cosmic radiation and really heavy, high doses of radiation going to the moon and to Mars, it's very important to develop new ways for the human body and the astronauts to counteract this impact. And there are different ways that I will probably explain later on during our interview when we will go more into detail in that. So there is really a lot to do in order to protect patient, to treat better patient with cancer, and but also to treat to also protect our astronauts going towards the moon and to Mars.
Yeah, that's an amazing initiative. I think that especially when you get excited about commercial space flight and, regular citizens being able to go into space and also taking into account all of the diseases that regular, normal, not trained for many years, going through many health exams, regular people being able to go to space, having studies like this is very important as we want to be very inclusive for space flight. So I think that's an amazing research. So how are you actually able to do this research? Like what's your research process like when you're, trying to figure this out?
So I'm a biologist by training. So being a biologist, you are very keen and to understand basically what are the molecular mechanisms that are going to lead to a disease. A disease doesn't come in one day, so it's a gradual process with different steps within the cells of the human body, within certain organs, before really the disease can be diagnosed. And we try to understand what are the first steps of each disease that could happen, for example, following exposure to radiation, or also that could happen in astronauts. When we think about astronauts, there are major impacts that will take place following exposure to microgravity, to weightlessness, and also to cosmic radiation. And these two big stressors are going to even induce a higher risk of developing different types of disease, for example, cardiovascular diseases or immune suppression, or accelerated osteoporosis, accelerated skin aging. All these kind of changes that are happening in the body will be even induced at a faster rate for long-term space missions. And trying to understand that is really crucial in order to make sure that to try to develop as much as possible countermeasures, so ways to mitigate this possible risk. This is really important. So as biologists, we really try to understand what are the basic molecular mechanisms of all these diseases, and then try to counteract, develop molecules, pharmaca, so different types of drugs that could counteract that and protect the astronauts or protect the patients the best way we can.
Yeah. I know there was some research. I'm always interested in the brain. And so I've always been interested on how, the vagal nerve is known to help a lot of our like bodily functions and including like increasing blood flow in our body. So and I'm actually writing a white paper right now, trying to understand more research on how, your vagal nerve can be impacted in space and how that kind of, increases syncope or other, neurological conditions that people face. So I definitely am very interested in this subject area. So I was very glad to hear that. Mm-hmm. I'm also interested in understanding your current research on the impact of cosmic radiation on European astronauts and Russian cosmonauts to better understand how human psychology or physiology is affected by space radiation and how to better prepare astronauts for longer missions to the moon or to Mars, as we're trying to get into Mars more. How are you able to conduct research on this, especially in a virtual setting?
Yes, it's not virtual only because, of course, we know that we have this COVID pandemic, but a lot of research is still happening really at the bench. So we didn't stop because of the COVID pandemic doing our research, and we've been very lucky at the Belgian Nuclear Research Center to be able to continue to conduct our research. So how does it go? Basically, we to perform this type of research, we have different types of research that we do. First, we receive some samples from astronauts on a regular basis. So these astronauts, before they go to space for between 6 months and 1 year, we receive some blood samples from them, and we can really understand better what we characterize as their own and their personal radiation susceptibility. What do I mean with that? Is that in fact, when you look, when you go under the sun, you go outside, you stay under the sun, and you see that some people get a very a red skin very quickly, and some others can stay for a very long time under the sun without any problems. So we understand that our susceptibility and sensitivity to UV, to ultraviolet radiation, is varied between person to person. And with ionizing radiation, cosmic radiation in space, it's going to be the same. So there will be a diversity, a variety of response towards radiation depending on each astronaut. So we are not equal in terms of radiation susceptibility and radiation sensitivity. Each astronaut will have a specific radiation sensitivity. Like each patient having to go through radiation therapy will also have a specific radiation sensitivity. So it's very important to understand what is the radiation sensitivity of an astronaut, and why is it so important is that it will help later on, if these astronauts would go to the moon or to Mars, to understand what is the maximal doses of exposure, what is the best program of radiation exposure all through the carrier, but all through the mission as well. And so what we see is really a difference between each astronaut in terms of response to radiation, to cosmic radiation. So we measure them before they go to their space mission, and when they come back, and we measure the difference between the two. So this is one way of conducting our research. And then we have also the enormous advantage to propose and to fly some experiments. So for the moment, on the International Space Station, we have a beautiful experiment, which is an experiment with rotifers. They will come back on Earth. They left with SpaceX, and they will come back on Earth next week. And basically, these rotifers are small organisms, and these small organisms are very resistant towards radiation. So what we've done, we had one experiment a year ago, and now we are doing our second experiment in space. And 1 year ago, they went and stayed there for a certain number of weeks, 1 month, and then they came back, and we studied the impact of space conditions on their growth, on the generations after they have been there. And now we know a little bit more about why they become so resistant towards space conditions. So this second experiment that we have sent, now what we did was they are so strong, they are so able to react and to counteract the impact of radiation, that we tried by irradiating them with very high doses before they went to space. And then we send them in December to the International Space Station, and then there they stay for a certain number of weeks before they come back on Earth. And then we conduct the same type of research of understanding the molecular mechanisms that make them so resistant towards radiation. So this is another type of experiment that we currently do. We also send different types of cells. We send some skill cells. So these are in vitro experiments in very small modules in which the cells are growing. And that helps us to understand what is the impact of space conditions on the skin. We also send some cardiovascular cells, some endothelial cells that are cells that are at the interface between the blood and the blood vessels. Really to understand what is this specific radiation sensitivity of these cells. Because basically, I was telling you that not everyone is equal towards radiation. So some of us will be very sensitive towards radiation, others will be very resistant. But inside our body, the different organs that compose our body have got a different and a specific radiation sensitivity. So if you look, for example, at spermatozoa or oocytes, they are very sensitive towards radiation. If you look at lymphocytes, so some of our white blood cells, they are very sensitive to radiation. So with a decrease of production of blood cells typically in the astronauts all along the space mission. So it's very important to understand the specific radiation sensitivity of each cell type within our body, and then for each of these cell type to develop ways to counteract space conditions. And another way we do also is to conduct experiments on Earth, on space analogs. And for that, I've been very happy and very lucky to go to Antarctica myself for a certain number of weeks during the winter, to really experience and to measure different parameters in volunteers, because Antarctica is a very good space analog. It's an extreme environment, and it's a very good analog for space conditions. It provides a certain isolation period, a confinement period, which is quite similar to space. And also it's a remote environment, a small with small teams, like in space, and with a kind what we consider also a kind of very uniform environment. So when you look at the window or when you go outside, it's a quite monotonous, which is not exactly the right word to use, but quite monotonous environment. So it's you don't have as much stimuli as you would have in a normal environment. So all that makes Antarctica a very good environment. So we are very lucky. We also conduct experiments since 2010. So for many years, and where we get some samples also of the people who stay in Antarctica for up to 1 year. And then we measure all the changes due to this 1 year period in Antarctica. It's very, very interesting to do that as well. And then the last way of measuring the impact of space conditions is in the lab, using different sources of radiation, mimicking cosmic radiation, but also mimicking microgravity. So we have 3 wonderful systems that we call random positioning machines. And these random positioning machines are simulating weightlessness, microgravity. And so we can place cells there. We can place skin cells or brain cells, different types of cells, and we measure the impact of cosmic radiation or simulated cosmic radiation and simulated microgravity on these cells. And that really helps us to understand the molecular mechanisms.
Yeah, that was very wellly explained. That was so interesting. I think, the concept how I think this is what excites me and excites a lot of people in science is you can manipulate even just 1 or 2 variables, like in other environmental factors or what part we're using in our body, what cells are working with. And you learn so much of, how we can apply this in a larger scale for the betterment, whether it be on Earth or for space travel. There's so much parallel. So that was very interesting to hear. And I'm actually very curious, what is your most favorite or exciting research project that you've worked on?
Oh, this is really an interesting question. I think the most exciting is the work on the astronauts. I think for
Yes.
me this is extremely interesting, but also work that we perform on patients. So being able to develop protocols that are personalized. So really to get some samples from patients before they start to be treated for their cancer, and to be able to adapt the dose of radiotherapy and the sequence for the best treatment. But so there is a lot which is going on, which is extremely interesting in what I'm doing. But I think the most exciting is really to this move towards what we call precision medicine, towards personalized medicine. For patients, for astronauts, really to be able to determine what is the best treatment they should have. The same for astronauts, what is the best program of mission they should follow. How many times, for example, on the moon, when we speak about a moon village, a moon outpost, a lunar outpost, how many times, how many extravehicular activities each astronaut would be allowed to do, depending on their genetic background and depending really on how strong they are towards radiation. This is really a crucial question. So I'm also part of various projects that are related to precision medicine, to personalized medicine for patients and for astronauts. And I think it's really to see how it's moving forward. I think it's really, really nice and really interesting, and to be able to help even more uh, patients and astronauts is really a delight, and for me a big boost of my motivation, I would say.
Yeah, the passion you have is, I'm sure anyone could relate with it. And so, did you always imagine yourself in the position you are in today, loving what you're doing every second? Like, or did you have some twists and turns in your journey that kind of led you to who you are today?
I think to be honest, I think I face difficulties every day. I think there are some difficulties that are bigger than others, but I think what really helps is to learn from all those difficulties. So in life, you don't need to be successful in everything you do, and it's impossible. The more you try, the more you try things, uh, which this is what is important. In fact, it's to try to do give your best, and to stay motivated, and but also to be resilient. To every failure can bring something, and bring something. You learn from that. You evolve. You learn. So you educate yourself, and then you are even more prepared to face the next difficulty. But indeed, there are difficulties, of course, all along the path, and at every age. When I was a young researcher, as now, if I'm leading a group, and a very active group, difficulties are different, but they are always there. And I think to build up and to develop a resilience, to learn to face these difficulties, to not be afraid, to be positive, is extremely important. And
Yeah.
to not stop trying to go for this adventure. I think this is really important.
Yeah, I know a lot of students who are especially young. Part of my interview series is to encourage people to follow their passions and not give up because they have some obstacles, or they might feel like they're not good enough, or, some obstacle that they may have. So it's really nice to see people like you who continuously went through their journey and, solved what they wanted. So when did you identify that this is like the career choice you wanted? Like ever since you were little, were you interested in space? Or was this something that kind of just happened to come along in like college or high school? Or how did you figure out your career?
In fact, I've always been extremely interested in how diseases uh, are taking place, are developed in the body. As far as I remember, since I'm very, very young, we had books at home, and I was really like reading these books with about pathologies. I couldn't understand much. I was too young for that, but there were pictures of yeah, cancer and all kinds of diseases, and they were a bit frightening. But on the other hand, I think they really boost my motivation to understand what happens, why is it so, and to understand the mechanism. And I think the since a very early age. So my first passion is really to understand how diseases develop, and then later, since 20 years, I'm very interested in space. We had in fact, it came from our Belgian astronaut that before going to space, offered the possibility, together with our government, to take with him about 30 experiments, and one of these experiments was the one from my lab, and that really boosted my motivation. And in fact, when you look at astronauts, so many potential diseases can develop during the course of a space flight, and so many issues, concerns concerning their life and concerning their health develops, that there is really a need to develop new countermeasures. But also the interest of that I have for space is also that everything we develop for astronauts is directly implementable for patients. So it's directly useful for Earth, for the benefit of humanity. And so it's extremely exciting research, and it serves two purposes: also to go for human space exploration and to prepare astronauts for the moon and for Mars, but also at the same time to be able to develop new protocols, new treatment for patients on Earth. And I find that terribly exciting and motivating. And that helps me every day to just
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah, before I started interviewing or doing a little bit more research, I never thought that space medicine was so parallel to medicine here on Earth. Like I would think that maybe there are like differences, maybe they're like separate fields, but really, what applies here on Earth also applies in space. And there's a lot of parallel research studies that are being conducted. So it's really nice how you can like, get two things done at once, which is amazing. And also, I know, like I was reading earlier an article about how, in the ISS, they always test certain proteins or certain, molecules or certain like bacteria, and they realize it has more functions because of the, like the microgravity that's in space. They behave a little differently because they think they're in our body compared to here on Earth in labs. So being able to like understand more about certain microorganisms better in space and applying that exact thing to developing better medications here on Earth for treatments like different cancers is, it's amazing to think of it like that. So we're implementing space for not only exploring our planets more and understanding how we formed and everything, but also it helps us, help scientific research here. So space medicine is so fantastic. I feel like people don't understand how much comes from it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you speak, you just mentioned a bacteria, and bacteria are just fantastic as well to work on. Our very first experiment was on bacteria, in fact,
Oh, okay.
and I was so happy when they came back, and they just landed in Baikonur in Kazakhstan, and we got them later on to analyze in the lab just a few hours later. So they were still like fresh samples. And I remember this first experiment. I just worked for 36 hours in a row without sleeping to analyze the samples because they were so fresh, and to see the differences between our control conditions, so the bacteria that had grown on Earth and the ones that came back from space, to see basically the shape of the cells were different, the size of the cells. They were in fact a bit smaller, they were rounder, they were not as elongated, and all kinds of physiological changes in this bacteria. And what is also very important is what you mentioned, the bacteria inside our body, the microbiome is extremely exciting, because we know, for example, that in space conditions, the microbiome changes. So the variety, the diversity of bacteria is decreased. The digestive tract, so the way the progression and the way the food is going to be digested is very different in a way, and not as fast. We know we have a lot also to tackle in terms of ingestion and the way the molecules from the food are absorbed. We know that the vitamins are decreasing in terms of concentration, and it's very difficult to keep the right amount of vitamins for the astronauts. But more than anything, the microbiome, so the gut microbiome, the 400, 500 grams of bacteria that we have in our guts, really need to be more understood, but also on Earth, because we know that there is really a link of this microbiome with different diseases, and from depression, from autism, from obesity, diabetes. So this microbiome can teach us really a lot, and certainly also in space again, understanding what are the changes, because each bacterial strain will have a different behavior in space conditions. And if you look, for example, at bacteria in the mouth, we have the buccal flora. You have really an imbalance of this flora in space conditions, with the good bacteria that are really helping to digest already in the mouth, that are really decreasing in terms of concentration, whilst the bad bacteria, which are mainly causing infections in your mouth, or caries, or these bad bacteria are really growing much faster in space conditions. So each bacterial strain potentially can change in terms of speed of proliferation. And it's really important to understand that better, especially if astronauts have got to go for a trip of 2-3 years to Mars, in order to better find ways of dealing with these changes.
Yeah, I think that's, exactly. It's key to always, continuously keep researching the different factors because there's so many. And so there's always going to be endless research in this. And I'm curious, throughout your education, was there some sort of key, internship or research program or something during your education process that really helped and assisted you in achieving your dreams or kind of getting a better understanding of how this industry works?
I think it's a very good question as well, because I think what I've always tried to do is, if I see some possibilities or some opportunities, if there is a grant or possibilities to apply for a certain like a travel grant or an award or a prize, I would propose, I would advise, I would really try to apply. So I've been applying really a lot for different types of grants, and they were not all successful, of course, but life is like that. But since really an early age, I've been trying to travel also a lot, to have different experiences, work experience in different countries, different labs, to understand the mentality and the culture of different labs, and to really learn from each experience.
Yeah.
So I would say what is very important is to try to connect to other people, to other groups, to other researchers, to not be shy, to try to be in a kind of a network, to not be afraid of challenges, and to take opportunities. There are really so many opportunities that are coming along our path, and to learn to detect them, to see them, and to make from difficulties and challenges to make them opportunities, because we learn from everything we've been challenged with. We learn, and to take it in a positive way. I think this is a really an advice I give to my students, and that I would like to give also to the audience here.
Yeah, I think from always every situation trying to create an opportunity and always just moving forward is just amazing advice. I always like sometimes feel, when you're at like a bad position or you think you're in a bad position, always making the good out of it and trying to find the positive, but also trying to find more opportunities you can apply for and keep persisting and trying because if you don't try, you're never going to get anywhere at all. So it's better to try than do nothing. So I completely agree with what you were saying. I think that's amazing advice.
Yeah, and it's not because you fail, or if you think you fail because you didn't get what you wanted, that it's negative. Just not think about it. It didn't work. It didn't work, and that's really and just move on and try. And I know that it's sometimes very difficult. It was difficult sometimes when I was younger to accept when I didn't get what I really had hoped to get, and but some other things come along the way, and that are sometimes even more beautiful than what you thought you could get. So not never taking like failure negatively, because it's a way to learn and progress, and it's the way to go to an even better challenge and an even better life. So take failure, or what we consider as failure, when we don't get what we want, when we have applied somewhere and we tried and it didn't work, just take that as in a positive way. This is really important.
I think that was beautifully said. I think anyone could connect with that because we all have situations where we feel like we didn't get what we wanted and we feel like we failed somewhere. I think always just trying to be positive and continuously moving forward and look for more opportunities. Maybe you'll get something better is always something that you should have on your back of your mind. And kind of, I'm really excited to also learn what excites you about the space industry and what makes you nervous, especially in the industry you're in. I'm sure you have many things to be excited about, but I'm sure you do have a few reservations. So, what excites you and what makes you nervous?
Yeah, in fact, I'm very excited by this universal adventure in which we are now, to go for human space exploration, to have a lunar outpost, and then to go to Mars. I'm very excited. But on the other hand, I'm a little bit, as a scientist, I need to be very critical as well, and there are still quite a lot of challenges that we have to sort out before we can really do that in the least risky way, so in the most
Mhm.
sure and cautious way. So yes, indeed, but this is adventure. When you speak about adventure and new ways of and new science, you always have some very good aspects, and then you need to balance the risk and towards the benefits. So I think for humanity, it's a really huge benefit to go for human space exploration, it develops also all kinds of new technologies that can be useful afterwards on Earth, or they can be developed also for different types of advantage for health and other things, and monitoring of different types of things in space. And but it comes with a challenge of, yes, should we not be more cautious and make sure that we don't take any risk before sending astronauts for long term to the moon and to Mars? So it's really having the good balance of risk and benefits.
Yeah. And to kind of wrap up our interview, I mean, I could go on all day, talking about your research. I love space medicine, and I'm so intrigued by all the experiments that you've done. I think it's really fascinating to see how there's so much. And I feel like sometimes we focus on like small, parts of a project, but if you look at the bigger picture, there's so much to do and so much to research. So I honestly could go all day talking about the 200 projects that you've worked on. But to kind of wrap up this interview, my last question is, what advice do you have for young people, young girls, minorities who want to regarding their pursuit of a passion of pursuing a career in the space industry?
Go with your passion. Just try. Be resilient. Don't continue and face difficulties in a positive way. Don't stress. Don't stress. Learn to control your stress and to move forward and give everything you have, and also listen to your body and listen to your guts. So if it's something, go where you think you would keep your passion alive and your motivation, and don't hesitate to change environment. If you think, yeah, maybe I would be more interested to do research in another domain, just go for it, and go where you think your passion leads you to, and don't face adversity in a negative way. Just do it in a positive way, and learn from that.
Yeah, I think that's always important for all of us to remember. To stay positive is one thing, and also to continuously, pursue our passion and not like stop halfway because we feel, certain things are bringing us down, or, you think that's not the right job for you. If you love it, just go do it, because you're going to, do an amazing job wherever you are because you love what you're doing. Like you said, you stayed, awake for 36 hours because it was fresh sample of bacteria from space. So that shows your passion and your love, and something that, you really want to contribute to the scientific field, which you already have greatly. So I want to thank you so much for your time, Professor. I really appreciate our conversation today. It was really fascinating to hear all the research projects you've worked on and the advice that you learned throughout your life. So I can't wait to see the future projects that you work on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you are doing. It's wonderful. What you are, your initiative is wonderful. And I would like to thank you also for doing that. It's really important. Your role, don't underestimate your role and what you are doing. This is very important.
Thank you so much.